in the forecast track. So that's why we absolutely can't issue any snowfall totals just yet. Everything's kind of all over the place. But one thing that has been consistent so far is this will be a big impact for December 23rd, and now possibly even early on Christmas Eve as well, especially in those lake effect regions.
I agree with that, Mike. All right, now we're back up on YouTube, so let's hope the internet stays on this time. I apologize about that. Must have been a 30-second glitch. I definitely did not do anything. So now without further ado, we can kind of get in and talk about this a little bit more. So I'm going to pull up some model data for us to go over here. And keep in mind, again, this is raw model data. Obviously, we don't have the ability to adjust it. We don't have the ability to to move the snow around where we want it to move. We don't have the ability to adjust the weather. Some folks say, hey, can you bring us a white Christmas? We would love to. I would love to give everybody, a nice, healthy white Christmas and whatnot. So let's kind of talk about this. So this is the latest GFS run that you see here on the screen now. This is hot off the press. Mike and I have already looked at it. For those of you at home that track model data, you've probably been watching every time a model comes out. And I know I stayed up late last night. We typically do that during this time of the year. So through tonight even, we're okay. A few flurries left over, cold temperatures. Monday looks good. A weak system tries to come into the area on Tuesday, but as you can see, we're kind of split. There's rain down to our south and a few flurries up in the UP of Michigan. So we kind of get dodged from that, nothing impressive. Now, as we start to move into Wednesday and Thursday, you start to see some moisture building in. And there are kind of two pieces to this a little bit based on the GFS model. You see one wave kind of moving up the East Coast with some rain and maybe a little bit of mixed precipitation and some snow. So that's one wave. And then wave number two kind of kicks out of the central and southern plains. And already by late Thursday at hour 99 of the GFS, so again, hour 99, that's 99 hours away. So that's a lot of time. Things can change. This is why we always say don't necessarily just buy into one particular model run. Even though it may look great for you, the next run might not look so great. So just kind of keep that in mind as we continue to move along. So as we get into Thursday night, Friday morning, now this is a little bit of a different timing. Okay, I think this is a little bit slower, so this now would bring us more of a Friday impact. And now I'm going to change it to the Ohio view and kind of zoom it in a little bit for us so we can get a much better, kind of closer to home look for you. So this is going to be about roughly 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and we have rain. Yes, you see lots of green coming into the area, a little bit of mixed precipitation and some light snow for our northwestern counties, but a lot of green, which would indicate that we have rain. And that obviously cuts into snowfall totals. We continue to move along. Friday morning, some rain. And then you start to see some blue and some snow start to wrap around. Mike, this low pressure system looks to be very intense. It's going to be increasing pretty quickly coming overhead, and that should allow for cold air to eventually win out. But even as that happens, it's still going to take some time for the rain to change to snow and really start to stick for everybody.
Yeah, and that is kind of the key with this system is when is that changeover happening? How long are we going to spend in the rain zone before it turns to the snow zone? If you're a snow hopeful, I've got a couple pieces of information that will at least hopefully give you some peace of mind that it will snow. I guess I'm in that camp. I'd like to see a little bit of snow, but nothing destructive and debilitating for those trying to get around for the holidays. I mean, I'm traveling myself, so I definitely want to get to where I'm going. But one thing that's interesting to me, and if you remember 2 years ago, we had a pretty hefty snowfall on Christmas Eve that resulted in a white Christmas in Christmas of 2020. This setup is different, but like Nick said, yes, we're likely going to start as rain. How much? We don't know just yet. We'll get that better sample when the system comes on shore in the Pacific Northwest. But wrapped behind it, that cold front is going to be a sharp drop. We're going to be dropping quick. And behind it, a lot of cold wind. And there's still a lot of moisture wrapping around the back end of this. So that's where we're going to get our snow. And if you're looking for snow, because that air is going to be so cold, we may see a situation where we do get a lot of fluffy, light, high accumulation snow because of how cold the air is. I'm looking at a GFS model representation of the liquid to snow ratio right now. And Nick, for you, you don't, we're looking. The GFS is saying something about a 25-to-1 ratio, which would be enough for fluffy high totals. Anywhere where that cold air just settles in and has enough moisture to work with. So that tells me I think we are going to see some spots getting some significant totals, some won't. And that really just depends on the timing of when that cold air transition happens and the position of the overall low. But it's going to be very cold behind it, very windy. And those are going to be some hazards we have to look out for. So can't say snow totals yet. Can't say exactly how fast the wind will be, but we're at that point right now where we should start thinking about it. Maybe make some alternate travel plans, or at least have a backup in mind, but don't cancel just yet.
Absolutely. And as we get into Friday afternoon, cold air should really start to win out. And as you can see, some snow starts to kick through. And then the center of low pressure is moving right through the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. So some wraparound and leftover snow for Saturday morning. And then conditions get better. But I want to show you one other aspect. And Mike mentioned making alternative travel plans. I want to show you the potential wind gusts with this system as it's working through. So back it up a little bit here. So as we get into Friday morning, the GFS, now again, these are winds that are at 10 meters, so 30 feet, so not necessarily at the ground. And some of this may not even ultimately make it all the way down to the ground, but this kind of gives us an idea as to the wind fields we could be working with here. So as we continue to move forward in time through Friday, winds really start to pick up. And Friday night, check this out, we're talking wind gusts at least for a short time. If the GFS were to be correct, 35, 45, maybe up to 50 mile per hour gusts. If it is snowing at that time, visibility is going to be reduced and there's going to be some serious problems potentially. But again, a lot of stuff can happen and a lot of things can change over a short amount of time. Each model run has been a little bit further to the west, which takes the heavier snow further west. And Mike, I'm going to switch things over to a little bit of a different view here on one of our other modeling platforms. And the thing that I wanted to kind of point out to everybody is that the last few runs, particularly of the GFS, have been trending further and further west. Now, what that tells us is that the chances of seeing, those double-digit type snowfall totals for us here in Ohio, those chances are starting to dwindle, I think, if these trends do hold. But what's interesting is the ensemble members for the GFS are still further off to the east, so it's the operational model runs that have been further west, and we'll have to kind of watch that. But this is a little bit of a different look for those of you at home now watching. These isobars are really tight, and those are our lines of equal pressure. And Mike, when they're that tight, the wind is definitely going to be something we have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. The wind chill values, that is one aspect of this that we're actually quite confident in, is it will be windy and we will likely have below zero wind chills on Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day. Last year we had a very warm holiday, and now we're talking about the complete opposite of that, where we're talking about it. This is dangerous. This is the type of situation where we really shouldn't be outside in it very long because of the frostbite dangers and hypothermia dangers. And of course that runs true for pets and any sort of animal that spends time outside in the wintertime. So that is another piece of preparation that should go into this, not just how much snow we're going to have, but how cold we will be. And depending on how much snow we get, that snowpack will kind of act like a cooler does. When the wind blows across it cools it down, just like ice in a cooler. So we could see some single-digit lows, negative wind chill values on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So if you had any plans of being outdoors, maybe there's some events going on outside on those days, or you were planning maybe going caroling or something like that, keep in mind that it will be windy and cold, and we are fairly confident in that aspect. Right now, it's just where is it going to track, how much snow we will see. I'm pretty confident we will at least see some, but it's just how much is what's in question, and how disruptive will that snow be.
Exactly. And here's a look at the temperatures. Mike mentioned by Friday night, temperatures are in the teens and 20s, but I'm going to show you the wind chill, because when we have the wind coming through, we're talking wind chills below zero. in some locations by Friday night. And as we get into more of Saturday, I mean, I know it's Christmas Eve. This is probably the last thing that folks want to deal with, but this is according to the GFS model. On Saturday at 10 a.m., wind chills double digits below zero. So that is obviously very concerning. Mike talked about frostbite, hypothermia. Make sure your pets are inside. If you live in like a manufactured home or perhaps your home's a little drafty, you might want to check your pipes this week, because with wind chills of that magnitude, you don't want to deal with frozen and busted pipes. That's probably the last thing, as a homeowner myself, that's the last thing that I want to particularly deal with. So make sure your pipes are checked. Make sure they're in good working condition. And those cold wind chills, they don't go away. This is early Sunday morning, late Saturday night. We're still talking double digits below zero. And going into Christmas Day morning at 7 a.m., we're still talking wind chills below zero. And in fact, if the GFS is correct, some spots, especially across eastern Indiana and maybe western Ohio, close to 20 below zero, which would definitely put us into that wind chill advisory criteria. We have not seen one of those in quite some time, so we may have to refresh our weather alert maps to get those populated for you. But just interesting to see that this is what we're dealing with. But I'm going to zoom it back out because I want to show you the last several runs of the GFS model, just kind of show you trend by trend as to what's been happening. And this is kind of one thing I think some folks forget about. They say, oh, well, you guys said it's going to snow. We said it's going to snow potentially, but we've never exactly said how much. So let's go back to, because also the timing on this has changed just a little bit here as we continue to move along. So I'll kind of shift the map a little bit. So going back to last night, and again, let's kind of bear with us here a little bit. So this is a look at last night. Okay, that center of low pressure was closer to Pittsburgh and Wheeling, which would be very, very favorable for Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, and Toledo to see a lot of snow. That's a prime track to see that. Also, you notice the strength of that low was 989 millibars. Now let's fast forward to today's look. Look how much further west this has traveled. This now puts the center closer to Indianapolis and Terre Haute, which puts us in the warm sector initially. However, something else that is of note here is this low pressure system, Mike, could become vertically stacked, and if that happens, cold air is going to start to wrap around the entire system, and that would allow us to change over to snow relatively quickly, but we're going to have moisture left over to play with in order to get that accumulating snow. But, I mean, Mike, that's not even 24 hours worth of model data, and that has shifted. I mean, Indianapolis to Wheeling is a good 4, 5, 6 hour drive. Right. And that's a huge distance and change geographically speaking.
And that's what makes this so difficult is, you think of the United States as a large chunk of North America, and, a shift from Eastern Ohio to Western Ohio may not seem that significant, but it is. It puts those boundaries of cold air in a different spot. And it puts, 12 million people on one side of a cold front that was previously potentially on the other. That said, the available moisture with this, I think that is definitely going to be key. But with all the cold air that's coming in behind it, we may see situations where it's not going to take a whole lot of moisture to get some of those snow totals, some of that real light, fluffy snow, kind of like we had on Christmas 2 years ago, where I was in Mansfield at the time, and we had 9 inches on Christmas Eve in 2020. So part of me wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that. But, if we do spend more time in the warm sector, then that will, of course, cut down some of the available moisture. So will we see over a foot of snow? Right now, my meteorological hunch is no, just because of how much time we'll spend in the warm sector. But again, once we get that better model data, we'll see if we see a shift back east again. And a shift back east means more available moisture gets sent our way while we're in the cold sector. So that's really, all these ingredients have to line up. It's kind of like when we forecast severe weather, whether it's going to be a tornado, straight line wind, hail, all that. In order to correctly forecast that, you have to have all the ingredients that line up. And this is quite challenging. It's a fun challenge, don't get me wrong. I enjoy it, but at the same time, it can be frustrating when, things have been consistent for 4 days, and out of nowhere, out of left field, we get some new data that suggests something different. So this will be a week to watch. We're in that point where we're watching. We're not panicking yet. We're hoping to develop some alternate plans for travel. Especially if you're planning on traveling on the 23rd, I am one of those people, so I am going to have to look at this very closely. And this applies for our whole coverage area.
It does. It really does.
Parts of our coverage area will see different things as well.
Yes, and so this is the GFS model. I will show you the European model. So we get this a little bit closer in time here. Now, the European model takes this center of low pressure and takes it right up the western half of Indiana, and we change over to snow for a little bit, and then we get what some folks may refer to as called a trough wall, where kind of the low pressure bombs out a little bit. We get some moisture on the backside that would kind of come through. That might be a little bit of a more favorable scenario for more of Ohio to see a decent amount of accumulating snow. But again, and Mike, the term bombogenesis is probably going to come up this week. I'm not afraid to say that I think that's a decent possibility. We're talking a 990 millibar low pressures it's moving in, and by the time it gets over to the Ontario area, up into the 970s potentially, which that's kind of hard to achieve around this area. And typically those type of stronger storms tend to pull northwest. But the other key here is how far south does this cold air get? If it gets further south than models are currently projecting, then perhaps this storm could dive a little bit further to the east. But I've seen a couple questions, hey, what about my app and what about this, that, and the other? Well, we've got you covered on that. So I'm going to switch things over to a different part of our presentation. I'm going to show you this is kind of just one general blanket statement reminder for you. We always get the question, but my weather app says, and then, says this or says this. I really think this is an event. It's a great time to kind of just forget about the apps for right now and be sure that you're following someone like us that will give you some human input into what model data is actually showing you. Weather apps are computer-based with no human adjustments, are made in most mobile apps designed for the general public. So, and I'm not saying that the weather apps are bad. That's not what we're getting at here, but a lot of those are computer-generated forecasts, and, when you're talking, an app that may be downloaded nationwide, there is not enough meteorologists out there to adjust that for your specific location. And that's something just to kind of keep in mind. Some other general reminders for you. Models, they run numerous times per day. Some of these run 4 times a day. Some of them, as we get a little bit closer, will run up to 6 or 7 times a day. So changes, yes, they're still possible. The energy is not 100% on shore yet, so weather balloons have yet to really sample the system and to feed data into the weather models. And don't just buy into one model. If you're a model watcher like us, we look at all of them. While one may look really good for you, that may not really be the best potential solution. Other times models will continue to shift, as Mike said, until we're 24 hours or less away. And as Mike said, don't panic. Don't get too alarmed. We don't have a ton of specifics yet to kind of go off of. Now, in terms of what we're confident with, okay, this is something else I wanted to share with you. Mike and I were talking about this, and we feel pretty good. Strong winds over 30 miles per hour. We feel pretty confident that that's going to happen for a lot, if not everybody, in our coverage area, which obviously that can be impactful if you're traveling, particularly whether it's daytime or nighttime. I know, some of us may be driving several hundred miles to get to our Christmas destinations this week, and this is something we'll get better specific timing once we get a little bit more clarity and get more certainty out there. Cold temperatures, we showed you this, and Mike and I, and really our entire team, we are very confident that we're going to have some cold temperatures, which again, not the most ideal for Christmas, and a lot of you are saying, well, if it's cold, it might as well snow. I'm kind of in the same mindset. If we're talking temperatures near or below 0, I'd much rather we just have some snow to work with. Now, in terms of how much snow we're going to see, that confidence right now relatively low. We have really no true idea, and there are a lot of folks out there sharing model data images of how much snowfall you're going to see. We have not shared a single bit of that with you because it changes from every single run to run to run. And it's not worth sharing that because we don't want to get you hyped up and saying, hey, this model has been very consistent for you, and then, the next run, it's gone. So just some other things to kind of share with you. And then lastly here, What do we know? Well, we know a strong system is going to impact the region more than likely. That seems to be a pretty good bet at this point. Very cold temperatures are likely for Christmas weekend. We talked about that. Winter precipitation is likely, but what we don't know is where and how much and the exact track. We showed you just over the last 24 hours, one model has shifted what would be about a 6-hour drive in one direction. That is significant and that is substantial, because yesterday it looked like places like Chicago may not have much to worry about. And if today's runs actually verify, they will have plenty to worry about. So that just goes to show you from one day to the next how much difference it can make, and also the timing of how quickly that cold air wraps in. As that low pressure system really strengthens up, we do expect cold air to wrap in pretty quickly as it's picking up that energy. So that should allow us to switch over to snow relatively at a decent clip. So that's kind of all that I really wanted to talk about here this evening. I'm sure there are some questions out there. The word blizzard, we're not going to really dive into that tonight. There are just way too many things that have to go into that, and we are still way too far out to get any kind of specifics on using that terminology. So if you see it out there, don't buy a lot of stock into it. Do you need to go get bread, milk, and eggs? Not yet. We are still several days out there yet. I would definitely not go and go panic buy or anything like that. We're just not at that stage yet. And again, I know a lot of folks are probably a little impatient saying, hey, when is this coming? What's going on? Why don't we have an exact, idea of what's going on yet? Well, again, the storm is yet to come on shore. And unfortunately, there's been, and Mike, I know you've seen it too, there's just so much chatter already, and we're not even within 3 days yet. So it gets a lot of folks amped up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and as many of you know, I'm a teacher, and and most of my students know that I do weather as well. And it's funny because even 3 or 4 days ago, they're like, I heard there's going to be a snowstorm for Christmas, and I was even kind of scratching my head. I'm like, you did? Where'd you hear that? And then, and I basically spent some time showing them model data on how you can't entirely rely on one run this far out. And I said, let's chill out for a second, and we'll just take it day by day and see where we're at. And that's kind of how you have to approach these types of situations. I know this winter has, for those winter weather lovers, admittedly like myself, it's been a bit of a dud. We had some cold air before Thanksgiving. Things warmed up and kind of stayed steady since then. So this is a big change for us. And it's coming right at one of the biggest and busiest times of the year for the Christmas holiday. So for a lot of folks, that is very inconvenient. We already have plans set, travel plans. Like I said, I'm going to be on the road too at some point. So it's all going to be about adjusting if necessary, but not necessarily throwing out your plans yet. And panic buying is never a good thing.
No.
I think we've all learned that over the past couple of years, that panic buying just causes situations like this to be way worse. Maybe if you're going to the grocery store this week, go at your normal time, do your normal thing, keep it in the back of your head, maybe buy a couple extra things, but that's all we have to do at this point. This isn't going to be, one of those situations where we need to be panicking just yet. Again, big transition. It's gonna be a shock to the system. It's the first major Arctic blast of the year where we're talking negative temperatures. It's been 10 months, 11 months since last February since we've had to deal with this. So yeah, it's been a while, but we'll get through it. And Nick and I and the rest of the Ohio News and Weather, Bell Park weather team, we're going to be on it. We're going to be watching it every day and multiple times a day, and we'll get you through it. Especially since we're, navigating the holidays at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I've got plans myself, just like you. So it's all gonna, obviously have some alternative plans, alternative ideas. Maybe that means you move your things to next weekend potentially, or something along those lines. So of course we'll be watching all this very closely. But again, just don't get too caught up in it just yet. And even if you are a person that's been staying up late watching each of the model runs, I'm not saying give up your hope. It's not worth it. But that's obviously that's your prerogative. But locally right now, just kind of pump the brakes just a little bit. Nothing to get overly alarmed about yet. and we'll kind of watch and see where things go. So I hope we've answered at least a lot of your questions. I know there's a lot of specifics out there. We do expect everybody to get in on at least some snow shower activity, some rain, some strong winds, and some cold temperatures. The exact amounts and timing of all of that is still kind of up in the air, still kind of being stirred around a little bit, if you will. And once the storm system gets on shore, we'll get a better idea of what's expected. We'll kind of get a better idea of when that cold air arrives and how that interacts. And of course, we'll have moisture coming up out of the south as well. That's obviously a big factor in this entire storm system as well, and exactly how the jet stream and the vorticity and all those different things come together. We just gotta wait a little bit longer. So we'll probably do these, type of videos for you each night this week leading up to the event, just so that we're giving you the latest. We're not going to post every single model run as it comes out. We'll try to give you heads up when we're going to be going live. That way, I know it's a busy week. It's a holiday week, so that puts a lot on you guys. It puts a lot on us to make sure we're getting you the right information. And of course, we'll do our best. So for now, guys, we are going to wrap this up. I appreciate you watching us here this evening. For meteorologist Mike Joyce, I'm forecaster Nick Dunn. Have a great night, everybody. Stay safe out there, and remember, watch what you see and watch what you share on social media. Have a great night, everyone.